Are we good to go? All right, good morning everybody. Warm welcome to the Principality Stadium. Thank you very much for coming in this morning to what I hope is an historic day in the future of Welsh rugby. We're going to start by, I think, just asking Dave to give an overview of the proposals. I'm conscious that you probably only had an hour and a half, 2 hours to look through it. So you probably find that helpful, given there were about 95 slides when I last saw them. So Dave's going to take you through an overview, and then we're of course happy to answer any questions that you want to pose after that. Does that sound like a reasonable deal for this morning? And we're happy to, Simon hates me for saying this, but we're happy to answer any of your questions. We'll outlast you today because we figure you probably have a lot of questions for us. So we're going to be staying until you're finished. Is that all right? Good. Okay, Dave.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Good attendance. A lot of people here. There's obviously something of interest. So, as Richard said, let me just try and outline what we've put forward. So you'll have seen in the pack that we are consulting on the system we believe is the most appropriate for the future of elite rugby in Wales, and to address the deficiencies and challenges that have caused the current period of underperformance that we've seen. So in the pack that you've seen, we've presented what we've called our preferred optimal system, which is the current view of the executive. It's my view of what we need as a system that's going to address all of the elements that we need to address if we're going to be a truly competitive nation going forwards. And this is unashamedly about trying to take Wales back towards the top of world rugby and club rugby. It is about trying to win, and it is about trying to acknowledge that winning is not just about one element of a system, it's about the whole system working together. I think in that acknowledgement, it's possible to think in the short term about just fixing one element and throwing all our resources at that. But my personal view is that if we do that, we could be back in the same situation in a few years' time. There is an acknowledgement in what we've put forward that rugby globally is facing significant challenges, financially and in different leagues, in different performance realms. So what we've tried to put together is something that's coherent and comprehensive across 5 different pillars of activity that you will have no doubt read by now. And so the headline piece of that is, of course, focus on the number of men's professional clubs, but that is only one of 5 interconnected elements that comprise a system that we believe can underpin the future success of Wales. So the men's club decision is really around investing in elite rugby and investing in excellence, creating 2 men's and 2 women's professional teams that are structured and financed to win at the top level. That's the ambition there. In making that decision, we also free up significant investment that can be deployed strategically across the rest of the system that creates both short, medium and long-term opportunity. The second element of the proposal is around aligning rugby leadership and trying to remove some of the friction that we've all felt and predecessors have felt over the years that exists within a small nation system that's trying to manage by agreements. And I don't personally think that we can afford the level of friction that we've seen if we're truly going to compete, because it is a huge inertia on our ability to create high performance across the system. One of the big notable radical departures is the national campus, and that is something that's directly related to the theme of collaboration. A small nation should have collaboration as one of its major strengths, and yet collectively in the system we've failed to do that over a number of years. And that is at the heart of some of the biggest challenges that we've faced from a performance perspective. So the idea of a national campus is we put everybody together. So we move away from the formality of meetings that might take up and down the motorway or have to be called at particular times, and we try and create an environment where relationships can be built, empathy is much more evident, and people bump into each other all day long and are able to solve problems and have discussions in a much more purposeful way than we can at present. And it's unashamedly a radical departure, because some of the other things that we've proposed, the first two pillars I've mentioned, really would put us on parity with decisions that other rugby nations have already made. So the campus is about creating a defensive moat for Welsh rugby. It's about creating competitive advantage in future. And then the fourth pillar really speaks to the funding model, and an acknowledgement that investing in rugby as a private investor, and we believe they are incredibly important to our future, but investing in rugby has been a rather demoralising endeavour over the past few years. There's been no clear path to profitability, and we're really relying on passionate benefactors, and we want to change that model to make it super attractive to be involved. And there is a continuum there between aligning rugby leadership and motivating investors to want to be involved in a profitable enterprise, and you'll see some of the detail behind that. And then the final piece speaks to the idea that we cannot just focus around the top if we want a sustainable future. So if we did reach the situation where it's two men's professional clubs, then competitively we would need to do something underneath that to make sure that there are still really good developmental opportunities for our players. And the SRC, and we propose a similar type of setup in our women's game. The SRC is an incredibly important opportunity for Welsh rugby. Those clubs are historic in many cases. They are connected to communities, and we believe further investment into them can really help to bridge some of the opportunity gap around development. We would like those clubs to play more of a role in the wider development of our younger players. And as I said, I think that could be a really unique part of a uniquely Welsh system, which is something I also think we need to do. We should be not ashamed and not afraid to do something boldly different and not copy other nations. Other elements in that you will see is we propose a centralisation of talent, of our emerging top talent international academies, where we can create a really elite environment and really outperform our competitors in the way that we develop our women's and men's talent to the top level. There are some proposals around development centres that extend that further down the pathway. And then the final element of that really speaks to, if you like, the off-field talent, the development of really, truly elite coaches and support staff in Wales, which again sustains every part of our system. And I just to finish, stress that this system is about our men's and women's game. It is about the entire ecosystem, and it is about trying to address systemic change rather than trying to just isolate one element of it and focus on that. So in terms of the consultation, we are putting that out as the executive's view of our preferred optimal system, or proposed optimal system. You will note there is a huge amount of other information in there, specifically around different models that are possible around the men's professional game. And we absolutely invite people to try and improve on the proposals that we have. That is the purpose of consultation, is to give people a really good listening to. We want people to come back with challenges, of course, but what we really want them to do is help us improve it and try and end up with something that is truly fit for purpose for the future of Welsh rugby. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Abi, do you want to say a couple of words?
Thank you. And I mean, just to reiterate what Richard said at the start, this is a momentous day for Welsh rugby. You've heard the vision that we've put forward. As Dave has said, no decisions have been made, yet we have put forward a proposed solution, but it's what we think, based on the analysis, is the strongest and the best, but we haven't made that decision yet. And I would just urge everybody impacted directly by the proposals, but also the Welsh public who care passionately about rugby in Wales, to engage in the process. There are many ways you can do that. And as Dave said, we're going to be in listening mode. And I know that the solution that we come up with in the end will be better if people have engaged and they've challenged us and they've thought about ways of doing it. But as you do that, I'd also encourage everyone to kind of step into the future and imagine how different it could be and how exciting it could be, and to see what we can make work. Not just, I know how emotional it is in Wales and how emotional rugby is in Wales, and people will be hurting today when they think about what this potentially could mean for them or their team. But to also imagine and step into that future, I'd encourage everybody to do that. So to reiterate, no decision's been made. Please engage, help us build a brighter and exciting and a winning future for Wales. Thank you.
So just 2 seconds from me on the board's perspective on this, and then we'll open it up for questions. So the board has listened to the exec over the past couple of months in developing these proposals. We've challenged the exec to come up with what's being described here as a proposed optimal system. And we think that's good practice to go out with something that, if you like, you can shoot at. Number one, we are going through this process of consultation in September. Dave has said very clearly that we want to listen to people's views on this, and we do. And the board will make a decision on the future, having gone through the consultation process at some point during October, with the executive listening to the feedback and then bringing a final version of this to the board. The board will consider it during October and make a final decision on this during October. I'll stress no final decision has been made yet. This is a process of consultation. Thank you. Open for questions.
Richard and Abi, you say no final decision has been made, but you clearly have decided that the current situation cannot go on.
Yes, I think that's fair.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct, yes.
And we have said very clearly, I think, if you're referring specifically to the position previously, which was 4 equally funded clubs, we've been very public about the fact that we don't believe that is possible going forwards, not just from an economic perspective, but actually in the way in which that system works. Dave has very clearly said that one of the issues going forward is we want aligned rugby leadership, and that system was just proving impossible for Abi and the team and the clubs, frankly, to operate in. So that clearly needs to change.
Abi, you touched on the emotion. You know what rugby means in Wales. What do you expect the reaction from both supporters and the clubs themselves to be?
So we've already engaged with the clubs. We engaged with them a lot over the last couple of months. We've been developing the proposals, and we also gave them a briefing on what we would be saying yesterday, so they know what's been coming, and I hope they will see a lot of their thoughts, ideas, challenges already reflected in the document. Now what we need to do is, over the next 6 weeks, is really spend that quality time with them, listen to them. I think there will be, change is hard, and this is going to be hard, but I think it will get us to a better place. I think for fans of the clubs, they will be thinking, what does this mean for my club? I know that's what I would be thinking, and that will be hard. But then I also hope that they'll go, well, but actually seeing our clubs not thrive, not survive, seeing the fan numbers drop hasn't also been a great experience for anybody. So actually what we want to do is create a future that fans are really proud of and want to be back cheering on their teams. So it's, there's the emotion of now, but then there's also, that's the word, I hope that they'll feel hope for the future and that they'll engage in what that will look like.
You can understand there will be upset though. Welsh rugby fans have gone through a lot. They've seen their traditional clubs ripped up. They were told to emotionally invest in the regions, first 5, then 4, and you're now asking them to go through the process again. What do you say to them?
Say that it is going to be hard, but I also don't think what we were doing and doing what we were doing was the right thing for fans either, because it wasn't. We were going to keep getting the same results. We were going to see, we also saw what happened with Cardiff this year. We were going to keep getting those kind of results, and the performance was going to continue to dip. So we have to do something that's radically different, and we're doing this with the absolute desire to put Wales back winning again, which is what the fans want. So absolutely, I recognise the hurt and the anger that they're going to be feeling. But I think in all the fans I speak to, and I speak to a lot, they also agree that we need to do something radically different. We've put a proposal out here, as Richard and Dave has said to be shot at, and please shoot at it constructively, because I can't remember somebody yet who has said to me we don't need to do something different and we need to change.
Can I just make one additional point to that, which is that I think everyone, and there's obviously a danger of this, everyone's focused on the 4, 3 or 2 question here, but I would encourage you to look at, as Dave said, at the holistic change that's being proposed here. For example, you made the point on, previously we had a wider group of historic clubs that everyone would have called a real club. Several times in this role, people have said to me the regions are not clubs in the same way. This proposal does include a significant investment into the SRC clubs to try and create that additional element of pathway that we've lacked in Wales that has really caused some difficulty in the past with bringing through elite players. So we're trying to fix the whole system as opposed to just to focus on the 4, 3 or 2 question.
Are you concerned about any legal challenges from the clubs if it doesn't go to the way that they think it should?
So there are probably 2 or 3 areas of potential legal challenge here. One is we have contracts with the clubs called the Professional Rugby Agreement, and we have said and made it very clear to the clubs that we will stick by our obligations in those agreements. We have 2 clubs on one and 2 clubs on a different version, as you all know, from the events that happened in early May. But we're confident about our contractual position. The second potential challenge is under competition law, and we want to hear people's views anyway, but doing a consultation is an important element for us as a regulator of rugby in Wales, of actually listening to people's perspectives on that, hearing that back, and then making the right decision for the future of Wales rugby as a whole, as opposed to individual elements of it going forward. So that consultation, I think, that we're engaging in now is a really important part of getting that right from a competition law perspective. And the final potential challenge is something to do with have we acted with malfeasance or unfairness. And we've been very transparent on this as a board, and we'll continue to be very transparent on it as a board, where we're doing this without sort of foul or favour to any particular one of the 4 regional clubs, and we'll continue to operate in that way. So no, we feel confident of our legal position.
And finally, Dave, can you just clarify, there's no mention of location, names, whether these would be new entities. What was the process? How did those decisions be made? And what was the time scale? Not the consultation, but the time scale to put this into practice if you are a third model.
Yeah, I think that the first step is to look at the model that we've proposed, and then depending on where we get to, then we can start to really focus on locations and names and all of those really important elements of it. But we're going to go through that step by step, and I don't want to preempt any of that at this stage.
And in terms of, just to clarify, in terms of when you would hope this to kick in phase 1 as well.
So maybe I'll take a crack at that, and please add. So the board will make a decision by the end of October. That's my commitment to this process. We will corral the board, and we'll spend whatever time we need to together, listening to what's come out of the consultation, listening to the exec new proposal on the back of the consultation information. I guess it then depends what they propose. I mean, if they were to come back and propose a 2+2 model, which is one of the options you've seen in the pack, and there's no change to SRC, for example, very limited build out of the infrastructure that's going to support performance in Wales, then I figure that's going to be pretty easy to implement. And the two model is probably a bit harder to implement than that, and you'll see when you look at the more detailed pack, we asked the exec to think about 3 things in considering the 4 or the 3 or the 2 type of model. One was high performance, the second was commerciality of it, and the third was, which I think you're getting to here, is the ease of implementation, the transition stuff. And so you'll see in there that depending on which option it is, it could take us a while to get there. Our desire is to get there as quickly as possible, because we obviously believe that a change is required for Welsh Rugby. The purpose of the consultation is to find out what the form of that change, and then we will implement with all speed possible to get to that final answer.
Richard, you've outlined where you might get a legal challenge in the future, what about the current legal challenge over the acquisition target?
Yeah, so we are defending that, as you might expect us to, and we're confident of our position.
And when is that likely to be resolved?
Well, at the moment we have an arbitration that's scheduled for some time in October. Whether that takes place or not, I think, is a matter for all three parties involved in the arbitration. Our view from a WRU point of view, which we've expressed to the parties, is that we think it would be better if that arbitration was stayed to allow us to do this consultation properly. And then if people are uncomfortable with the outcome at that point in time, then of course they can restart a legal challenge if they want to.
Does that process not put the consultation process in a bit of jeopardy?
I don't think so. I think we have to manage both, and they are clearly interrelated. But the fact that we've been very public with this around May, we had some real cogent reasons why we did need to step in and rescue Cardiff. We actually talked that through with all the clubs the day following, our decision to do it, and the legal challenge emerges, quite a bit later, frankly, to that. So we believe in the best interests of Welsh Rugby, we shouldn't hang around and wait for that arbitration to reach its conclusion.
But they couldn't have affected your decision, though, could they?
Sorry?
In saving Cardiff, from what we understand from speaking to Scarlett yesterday, the basis of it is that it's against what was the existing PRA rule.
Yes, and we disagree with that. We think the previous PRA was pretty clear, and that we had the authority to step in and rescue that, and indeed we did it for the best interests of Welsh Rugby.
So you nailed your colours to the mast here with Dave's utopian plan. Which two teams do you condemn to death here? And how does that happen?
So that's what we're consulting on. And, I'd stress, I think the gentleman over here put it very well. We don't know whether we're condemning two teams to death, 3 teams to death, no teams to death, or whether it's all 4 teams and there'll be 2 new operations emerging from it. That's the purpose of the consultation. So we've not made that decision.
And how do the regions or the fans engage in the consultation process? What do they physically do?
Yeah.
And how do you know that their views are going to be heard when they're being heard by the people who are proposing something different? Is it to the executive? Do they rally the 12 people on the board? How do you go through this process to make it fair and equitable?
Yeah, so Dave, do you want to talk us through that?
Yeah, so from a fan's perspective, the information will be out on a microsite on the website later today, so they'll see the same information that you've seen, and they can engage directly in that and provide feedback through that mechanism from the 1st of September. In terms of how that information is collated, really the same as all the other information we're taking into account. I think just to make an important distinction, the consultation is with the groups who are directly affected or potentially directly affected by the decisions that get taken, so the players, the staff, etc., who have seen the list. The fans are an incredibly important voice, and we want to listen to what they've got to say. So that will be part of the consolidation of information that's viewed by board and provide the insight to what we're doing going forward.
Let me just finish answering your previous question, then you'll get to ask that one. So at a board level, we're planning not just to get the revised proposal, if there is one from the executive, but at the moment I'm planning for the board to spend maybe a day or two actually going through the core consultation that's produced. So every consultation meeting is being recorded through AI technology, and all those will be available to board members. And my intention is to provide enough time for the board to hear that directly. So to your point on, is it being filtered through people who've already made that decision? We are conscious of that. We actually think the executive is, more mature than just, pushing it away because they really want that input. But we want to safeguard at board level as well. So all that stuff will be taken through by the board spending enough time to look at it, and then we'll make an ultimate decision based on looking at that and any revised proposal from the executive.
And Rob,
So
can I
moving
just
on then,
build?
what-
Can I build on that? Just
Yeah.
because there's two really important points. One is that we're forming an independent panel as well of high performance experts from different high performance systems who understand what it takes to build and sustain a successful high performance system, and they are independent from Welsh Rugby. So I think that will be really important. And also, I think the thing. I really hope that in the best interest of Welsh Rugby, this doesn't become a PR battle, but actually becomes a big conversation about how, and we are being really open, we're being really transparent, we're sharing all the analysis because we want to have a better solution as a result of, and one that's owned, and one that's believed in, and one that people can get behind. And we're not going to shy away from the difficult stuff. Not everybody will be happy. We won't we'll fudge it if everybody's happy. But we want to do that. And I really hope that people can step out of their kind of corners and really come together to do this, because it cannot just be achieved by a top-down WRU solution.
There's a danger this turns into a beauty pageant, or it turns into a Connaught march of Galway.
Well, what's the alternative, Rob?
Well, change needs to be there.
Yeah.
But it's how you get to that point,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Well, but I think we're laying out really clearly how we're going to do that. And
So could the board, for instance, not go to each of the 4 regions and meet the board there, do that sort of thing, have a consultation where you're actually going to the threatened elements and listening to them, because
but we are going to the.
no, the main board, the people that will make.
Yeah, but I think the consultation process is right. We have to have the people operating the clubs first and foremost understanding it. The board members will engage in that process as well. Owners, investors are invited to those meetings so that their views are going to be recorded and represented faithfully. They're fully involved in this process. So I've got complete confidence that we're going to have all of the information. And as Richard said, we wouldn't be doing this publicly if we thought that we're going to try and kid people with the outcomes, that the information's going to be there, it's going to be published.
And all our board will be in listening mode during this period.
Yeah.
They already are. So, they all are connected at various points throughout, and the councils, the WRU council, they're all connected within Welsh Rugby and the broader system, and they're all out there listening. And we actually sent a guidance note to them all to make that clear. So they are there to listen, they're there to engage. So we'll absolutely, that's another thought, but they're not going to be sat here in a darkened room just waiting for October. They will be out listening to their stakeholders and listening to the people who care.
Dave, a lot of people will look at this document and be very sympathetic to what you're trying to achieve and the level of detail and so on. And if you were starting with a blank page, they could probably sign up for it. But what you're asking them to do is to sign up for something where they don't know what the sacrifice is, they don't know what the cost is. And that's a failure in the leadership, isn't it? That you have to tell people, well, this is what we want. And this is the sacrifice that you have to make to get there. Now, if that's part of the consultation process, it's a cop-out, isn't it? You're basically tying up 4 regions in a sack and throwing them in the canal and suggesting they fight it out. The leadership element of this should be to say, this is what we want, and this is how we get there.
Well, I disagree. I don't think that's the way we're proposing it at all. I think we've put a clear vision about where I think the future could lie. I think Abi articulated that really well. We're asking people to let go of the past and the present and imagine a completely different future. And the 4 regions are being fully involved in that process. So I don't subscribe to your analysis.
Can I also just come in on that? I think what's really important here is, Welsh Rugby is a huge part of the Welsh economy. It's a huge part of Welsh emotion. It's hugely important to Wales. And my plea to all of you, and I recognise this is going against some of the core things which I know you're kind of interested in doing, but if we can avoid emotive language, we are not tying 4 regions in a sack and chucking them in the canal. I recognise that could be a very nice headline at some point, but we want to cut through that and to have a real conversation on this if we possibly can do. And we believe you all have a collective role in helping us do that. and to stay out of we recognise this is emotion. The current state of quo is very emotional as well, I can tell you that. So, we are trying to get to the best answer for Welsh Rugby. We believe this is the best way to do it, to put up a proposal that people can look at, a holistic proposal that goes across all aspects of Welsh Rugby, not just addresses a sticking plaster. It'd be very easy for us to come out with a sticking plaster. We've chosen not to do that. So please try and, as you write your pieces, which I know you're inevitably going to do, if you can convey that, there's a genuine consultation here, and please, if we can stay away from emotions, we don't want emotions stoked through this process. We recognise that's difficult enough as it is.
With the proposed optimal system, you say you need 17 million of external private investment over 5 years, and also that only 4 non-Wales qualified players across the 2 clubs. Is that a bit sort of wishful thinking?
So, a couple of things in there. I think you're referring to Model D in that as being the 17 million, which is not the same as the preferred optimal system. That's Model D refers specifically to the men's professional clubs. So, sorry, I've forgotten the second part of your question.
The four foreign players.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're putting these out as proposals. What we want to do is create a system that really encourages and supports elite Welsh talent, and therefore, 4 might be a provocative number, but I think from my perspective at the moment, the number is too high, and commensurate with it being too high, the performances aren't good enough. So we've got to really think carefully about what do we want it to look like, and we expect in consultation people have different views on that, which will help to inform what the final answer is.
Can I add one thing to that, just to help clarify one of those points? So the proposed optimal system has to pick one of the club configurations. At the moment, what Dave has said is the nearest one to it in the analysis is D, but it's not actually D. So, for example, in D, you'll find that there's 45 squad players, whereas in the optimal one, Dave is proposing 50. But the analytics on which of the club models you choose are provided across A, B, C and D, because that's the way the team thought about it. Most of your 17 million, actually, in terms of private subscriptions, remember this is over a 5-year period. We debated long and hard how to show what's a very complicated financial analysis here. Most of that 17 million is actually upfronted. And today, one of the issues we are facing is, in some cases, not in all, but in some cases, there is some owner fatigue around making contributions to the clubs. So a lot of that 8.9 is upfronted, and I think that what we did in all the models is we assumed for every club there'd be £1 million a year of private contribution, which is considerably down from what's proposed. What is historically true. Yeah. So we're trying to reduce the dependency and therefore reduce the risk attached, as you all saw from what happened with Cardiff, of owner contributions. So I don't know if that helps, but I'm trying to...
And then just on the other 2, on the proposed optimal system, if you were, as you are proposing, to go down to 2, what happened if you continued with 2 existing regions? What happens to the other 2? Do they disband completely? Do they go into SRC? Could they even join a franchise premiership across the border?
I think all of those options are open.
So they could join the English League if they wanted to.
Well, that would be someone else's decision, of course. But all of those options are open, and part of the consultation, I guess, part of the transition, if we get there, will be to manage that. We've of course given that some thought, but we want to hear the reality of that, and the transition period. If this is where we end up going, transition will be a really significant and much more detailed process that we've got to go into, so that we can. It isn't as simple as turning one thing off and turning the other thing on concurrently.
Would it be a bit of a hammer blow to the master plan if you had Welsh clubs and regions playing in the English League?
I think that we've got to think bigger picture, longer term. In the short term, that's not a viable option. So I think what we're dealing with is what we've got at the moment. We're competing in the URC. That's our focus. We want to be winning the URC. That's the ambition.
But you
Can I just say-
stand in their way?
Can I just one other thing just before I let you come in? So we did a pre-consultation with some players last night, and we made it very clear that one of the key focuses for us out of this is to retain key player talent in Wales. So I hope that what comes through this is our absolute desire to see Welsh players playing in Welsh clubs with a greater degree of cohesion because they play together more regularly, and therefore clubs consist of player talent, but they also consist of coaching talent, they consist of fans. We want to make sure all of those stay with us into whatever final solution we end up with here. Sorry, Abi, I cut across.
No, I wanted to suggest that the idea that two clubs that were no longer supported by WRU could play in the English Premiership franchise, understanding what the minimum standards are that are being required there, cap levels, all of those would be, I think, very, very difficult. I'm just going to say that. Because, so I think it's a bit of a red herring to suggest that two clubs
would you give
could
them
do
permission?
that. But yeah, I mean,
Or would you stand in their way? Because you still, if they're coming out of Wales, by that understanding, you still control them.
Well, look, I think we're getting way into the future of hypotheticals. What we want to focus on is building a system which is the best possible system for Welsh rugby success, and not an English system, a Welsh system, which is super attractive to the best Welsh talent that currently is playing elsewhere. So we want our best players to want to choose to play in Wales because they're passionate about Welsh rugby, but also because it's the best development environment in world rugby.
So in terms of hypotheticals, where are you going to put this new national campus?
We haven't decided yet. So again, there's a whole load.
Does the capital funding come for that?
Well, again, we've done work on that behind the scenes. Capital funding, as you know, is different from operational funding, and there are lots of different partnerships and opportunities. If we're able to create something as inspirational as that, I think there would be a lot of commercial interest as well. So,
Best guesstimate on cost?
we don't know at the moment.
On the campus,
the response to the question about teams playing in England being unlikely if they sit outside of what your preferred system is the likeliest option in that scenario then that those teams just go bust?
No, because I think what you're saying, I think we're getting into hypotheticals that will create anxiety out there. Let's agree what the best system is, and then I think, and it builds on Graham's question, the next step is once we know what the structure is, then there's a very detailed process that will happen from then on in about what does that transition look like. And there's so many different scenarios that you can model for that, and we need to get there first and then work through that process, having listened to what everybody has got to say on it. If we were to try and work out the potential path to each of the different models now, we'd be here and we'd miss the opportunity. So the other really important piece now is the timing of this, because we need to get this done. We need stability in the system. We're going to be contracting new players, contracting existing players. That's why we're really pushing hard on this. So, we could be sat kind of trying to work out all the different scenarios. Let's agree what the optimal system is, and then we will work through a really detailed transition plan on what that looks like and what it means to the clubs.
I think for the consultation period to work, the plan needs to be more concrete. Like there's a lot of if buts and maybes in it, but we're just sort of unwrapping now.
And that's the purpose of the October board meetings, is to come out with
what are they going to be consulting on if there's nothing there to sort of grasp? As in, there's so many hypotheticals that we're coming up with, and it just seems to be lacking detail a little bit, the proposed system. So what are these people going to be consulting on?
So just to be clear on the competition, our working assumption is we are committed to the URC. So that's very clear. That's probably somewhere in the document, I think. But if it's not, we're very clear. That's our working assumption on that. So I think there is a lot of detail actually in the document. And we're open to, as I say, consultation on each aspect of it. Give us your feedback. We will harden on some of those details as we go through September, as we hear feedback on them. And then in October, the board will make a decision on, the detail of what we actually need to do. Then we'll have a transition plan, as Abi suggests, to get there.
When's the cut-off date with URC and EPCR?
For next season?
No, is it 2 seasons' time where you can get out?
Officially it's 28, yes, in terms of the contract.
27, 28 or 28, 29?
it's 2 seasons from now, so it's September 2 years from now.
Dave, on the campus,
Yeah.
is some of your thinking behind it from your experience of the FA and St George's Park in terms of getting everyone under the same roof, clear alignment? You obviously experienced that in sport in a different role.
Yeah, I mean, somewhat, and somewhat from other experiences around the world, both in multi-sport environments where we've seen great success in countries like New Zealand, for example. If we think of the kind of campus model that exists in Premier League football, when we talk about the pathways within that, you might even borrow an analogy from Formula One and a factory and different racing cars competing. But, at its essence, the proposal is about how do we really supercharge collaboration and alignment? How do we really bring people together? Because, as I said in the intro, for a small nation with real proximity, we haven't done that very well. So we need to think about how do we do that differently. It hasn't worked well through an agreement. There's inherent frictions there. It hasn't worked, well just by force of personalities. And we might say, Steve Tandy's going to be out there, and he absolutely is and committed, but he can't be the entire answer for a system. So, I think, again, we've got to keep asking ourselves challenging questions. What are we going to do better and differently to any other nation if we believe we can outcompete them? Because, as I've tried to say at the start, the performance is a dynamic environment. All of our competitors, whether we are clubs or whether we are national teams, are not sitting on their hands doing nothing for the next 5 years. They are all trying to compete and get better. And so we can't just design a system that's fit for today and say that, well, that's good enough, that's going to improve us, because others are going to try and outcompete us. And some of those have different advantages. I think what I want us to focus on is what advantages do we have in Wales and how do we supercharge those advantages? So the campus idea is one illustration of that. I think if we really lent into that, as different and as radical as it might sound, that is the opportunity to supercharge collaboration and make a difference.
So for clarity, in theory, if 2 teams is ratified by the board, you'd see the 2 domestic teams and all the national teams.
And the national, and the national academies and our coach development and the design of that space would recognise that we don't want 2 teams. This is where a Formula One analogy falls down. We don't want 2 teams wearing the same colours. They are 2 independent clubs competing against each other with separate identities, inhabiting a campus with some shared spaces. So if you like, they'd have their own team rooms, their own dressing rooms, but they might share a gym, they might share a dining room, they might share other spaces. And the environment allows people to bump into each other and have conversations. So if we want to be the best in the world at the scrum, and we really want to supercharge that, how does that happen at the moment? People are up and down the motorway having formal meetings. How do we make that better? How do we make that happen more quickly by the informal collisions of people on a day-to-day basis? The same as happens in advertising and other creative industries. We've got to look outside the box if we want to try and do things differently, and look and be brave enough to lead sometimes and do things that no one else is doing, and do the things that people think are a bit nutty or too different or too uncomfortable. And as Abi said earlier, I think it's really easy to sit there and say, well, that won't work. And what we'd encourage people to do in consultation is just sit the other side of that and say, how could it work? And we want to hear both sides of that.
Can I make one other point just very quickly? So the teams would play in different places though, so they wouldn't that wouldn't be their home grounds. Just to be very clear on that.
This is the point I was going to make. They're training in the same area. That you're talking about trying to get fans to buy into potentially some new concepts here.
Yep.
If they're not training in that area, let's say there's an east and a west. If they're training centrally somewhere like Vale Glamorgan, is there not just a risk that it all becomes very homogenous? And it's just 2 teams.
So I
there's
just
no identity.
Back to what I said before. I think people are going to raise reasonable objections to it, right? That's fine. What I want people to think about is how would we retain that identity and still make that concept work? Because we don't have to be fixed and say, well, it's 24/7 every single day in that environment and never anywhere else. It's how do we think creatively around some of these concepts that do feel different, that might feel uncomfortable, but how might we make them work? Because over history, that's how people have evolved. That's how leaps have been made. That in future people look back and everybody's doing it, but at the time, well, that was ridiculous. Why would we do it that way?
Advancements in sport come from competition.
Well, they do, but
not from necessarily.
But I think that's oversimplifies what we're trying to do here. The players last night asked a really good question about that. Are you asking us all to do exactly the same thing? So both teams playing exactly the same way with the same calls and all that sort of it. We want that creative tension. So I think if you think about, do we want a Welsh DNA and an identity? Absolutely. Something that we're recognised for. Do we want, a curriculum that's absolutely detailed about what each team? Absolutely not. We want the inherent creativity, but we also want the proximity for people to share and collaborate, which has been sadly missing because it should be part of our strength going forwards. So I can understand how people might look at that concept as, oh, that's never going to work. And that's part of the emotional journey we go on whenever there's a new idea there. And what I'm encouraging people to do is sure, lean into that and give us your rationale, but also think about how could it.
I think if you're already cutting it down from 4 to 2 and having 2 centres of excellence, for example.
Well, again, then we're just, we have choices to make in all of this. Then then there's an argument that we're diluting resources and we still have the challenge of connection and alignment. So, all of this is about choices. What we've tried to do with the optimal preferred solution is to say, look, these are the choices that we're putting out there at the moment because we've thought about a lot of these things. We haven't, just sort of flippantly thought, well, that's a good idea, let's crack on. It has some evidence. There's some trails of it. You've talked about where does this come from? Who's doing things like this around the world? And these are choices. I don't think it's a choice to continue to do what we're doing at the moment, or a reasonable choice. So we then have to continue to ask ourselves, do we want to go into some structural things that are just going to improve things a bit? And we could make that choice. But in doing that, we have to ask ourselves, is that going to be enough to meet the ambitions that everybody's got?
Are there rugby models that you've seen through your research with this?
No. And so, it's my point earlier. We want to lead. We want to be ahead. So we have to, if we just sit here and say, well, Ireland system's really good, let's just copy Ireland. Do you think that's going to be enough for us to exceed what Ireland are doing at the moment? I personally don't. So we've got to continue to challenge ourselves and let's be brave and lead rather than just follow.
The flip side of that could be other countries haven't done it because there's a reason they didn't do it.
Sure, and look, there are lots of examples through history where things like that have happened. When St George's Park was being proposed for the FA, there are a huge amount of people who said, well, that's just another Lilleshall, why were we going back to that sort of thing? And in the early years, people were really ready to criticise that. I think it's become a beacon for England football teams and coach development and exceeded that. So I think we have to...
On a national level, yes, but you don't have Manchester United, Man City.
Sure, and
in the same facilities.
Of course you don't. But look, just bear with the narrative. We're trying to do something different here because we want a different future. And my philosophy is, if we're just going to copy people, we will always be behind. So it's uncomfortable. I understand that we're putting things out there that are different and in some cases radical, and I think that's a good thing. Because I think people actually want a radically different future. That's what I think everybody is in vehement agreement with. We don't want to continue to perform like this. So, let's be brave and have that conversation.
So hang on, you've been very patient here. Sorry, just a second.
You mentioned the pre-consultation with players. Has the national council been put in place? Because obviously Matt raises points. For me, it feels like it could almost devalue going into the national team setup. You hear players now and you talk of that step up. Now it's literally just going across the corridor.
Yeah, so we've just started to engage with the player group last night. We'll have a number of meetings with players and we're going to listen very carefully to them. And look, of course, some of the things that you mentioned in theory could be objections to it. But as I said before, with all of this, we've got to test both sides of it, which is to say, if we think inherently there's a good idea there, how might we make it work? Because Of course, no one wants to be in exactly the same environment 365 days a year, but equally the opportunities to go out and train in different regions at different times, or, that's something you would want to do anyway. Arguably, the Welsh national team may be well tired of training at the Vale. It's been there for 20 years or whatever it is. So these things are always need some sort of freshening up. But I don't think inherently they're the reason not to do something. It's about how do you execute that in a way that minimises the challenges but maximises the opportunity.
Have you spoken to the URC and the other unions as to whether they would be on board with two teams in their league sharing a facility? Is there a conflict of interest? Are there sort of protocols guidelines around that?
So we have spoken to the URC and the URC executive, and then the shareholders of the shareholder union, so Ireland and Scotland, Italy, South Africa. And they are, I think their key message, I want to thank them, is, we recognise that you need to do something different. We will do everything we can to support you. They're very clear that their preference would be for us to have continued to do, as is, but they recognise that that is increasingly challenging for us. They are going to be consulted formally because they will be directly impacted by any proposal, and we'll be looking...
Apologies.
Don't worry.
Not sure how to get rid of it, Rob.
Is that 10 quid or 5 quid? Sorry, that's my daughter.
In order to achieve your optimal solution, is the executive preference for clubs to merge or for existing clubs to remain in some...
I know David said this, so genuinely we don't have a preference. I think my strongest desire at the moment is that we consult, and I have to say the clubs have all been really engaged in the pre-consultation, and as we have developed this proposal, we now want to sit down and exactly have those kind of conversations. So, if, and it's a big if, because this isn't, we've got to go through the consultation and listen, if the answer... I'm going to say if the answer was 3, what does that look like? If the answer was 2, what does that look like? Is there a desire by any of the clubs to merge, or do we think about a tender process where clubs compete? So that's why we need to get to the answer. I know it's frustrating for those who want to already know what it means for the clubs, but let's get to the right answer for Welsh Rugby, and then out of that will come the process. But will we be having conversations with the clubs on what a 2 answer means and how they could see that working and what their preference would be? We will, and that'll be part of the listening, Matt. So we don't have a preference at this point in time.
From in the past you've said the change in your opinion to go from foreign funded to a new model, one of the factors in that was Cardiff's situation. There might be some fans in other regions now saying, well, hang on, my region is at risk, so that you could save Cardiff. Do you understand that frustration?
Ken, and I think that logic isn't the logic. So what we saw with Cardiff, as Richard mentioned at the start, was challenges with the investment. And what is in this new model is we are reducing the reliance on the investment. We're also creating clubs that would be profitable. So it would allow the clubs to repay their debts, which I think is really important too, and put them on a sustainable footing. Cardiff showed how difficult it is to get investment in rugby. So actually the logic is Cardiff has happened. That means we have to rethink our model. Dave has also said, I think it was Richard, all 4 clubs will be treated with parity in this process. So Cardiff gets no special treatment. We're very close to appointing an independent chair for Cardiff, and we'll be listening to them in the same way that and their employees in the same way we are with the other 3 clubs. So hopefully that answers your question.
I suppose obviously with respect to what's going on at Cardiff, you could have got halfway towards your solution had you not stepped in. So that would have saved you.
But we also would have seen, hundreds of employees and players being made redundant overnight. We'd have seen sponsors lose all their money. We'd have seen creditors lose their money. So that would have also not been the right answer. We still have the ability, if 2 is the solution, for Cardiff to be part of whatever solution comes out of that. So that hasn't changed. What we did was provide a period of stability and secure people's jobs whilst we went through this process. And I will absolutely stand by that every day.
And we have an obligation to provide 4 teams to the URC,
we do.
Which was one of our biggest financial risks if Cardiff went bust, and that obligation is on the WRU.
to be clear, I'm not criticising.
No. Yeah.
I'm just saying, you're saying no jobs would have gone. Now there are other employees in other regions who are thinking, well, now my job can go.
So I think that being able to do that in a transitioned and a managed way rather than an overnight way, so we can look at how we can bring roles together, we can redeploy roles, we all know, if you look at the 4 clubs at the moment, and we can see it, if you look at their spend over the last few years, in line with the money we've been able to invest, they've had to go down. A lot of those teams are already to the bone, so there's opportunities for us to strengthen those teams in this new model, but we can do it in a transitioned way, in a managed way. Nobody wanted to see that number of people lose their jobs overnight and have that level of uncertainty.
Richard, there's a few of us in this room.
Sorry, just to say, we are on time now.
I knew we'd do this.
You might be going, but just to let you know that.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
There's a few of us in this room, like the old father over there and me, and I think Simon might even be there 23 years ago in another part of this country where someone in Abi's position came in and said, that's what's happening, fellas. From next season, this is going to be it. That's the one thing that's missing here. Now, you obviously have legal obligations, which is why Dave's sitting on his hands a little bit and going through this consultation period. But it comes back to what Father Graham said. In terms of leadership, we've got a great idea here. Abi, we all know something's got to change. But I think you need to go. That's it. Vote on it, do what you want, but that's the way you've got to go.
So my experience of leadership is it's often better to take people with you as much as you possibly can. So hence the reason for the consultation. Well, we'll disagree on that. Yeah. Look, at the end of the day, we will make a decision. I'm not going to duck the decision, but I think it's worth spending time with people, emotionally engaging with them as well as intellectually engaging with them and understanding different perspectives. Because I would be very surprised if we ended up exactly in the position we are today at the end of September.
You wouldn't.
No, I would be. I would be surprised. I would be. This is a genuine consultation. There aren't better. I've been in this job 2 years and a bit, and I'm learning every day. There are new perspectives, there are new things I'm hearing about that affect my view, and I think I'd expect that to be true of every person around the board table. We're going to listen to this, we're going to hear it, but then we will make a decision. We're not going to sit on our hands at that point. Don't worry.
It's the recommendation of the executive board. Or the board.
So there is one board. It's a unitary board, if you like, across the WRU. It will be a decision of that board.
No,
and Abi,
this is an executive proposal.
It's unanimous amongst the executive board.
Yeah.
Have the wider board seen any?
Yes. So
they given a response?
Not yet. That's why we're going out to consultation.
That was their response. Go out to consultation.
And we've said things like, definitely think about. One of the things in the on the board conversation was, look, we want your view, Dave. That's why we've hired you on what's best from a high performance standpoint. So make sure that's really clear in the document. Don't cut to just an answer that's, you could say commercially we can only afford 3 regions, 2 regions. That's actually not true. But don't cut to that. Look at it properly, analytically, through a high-performance lens, and that's what you'll see is in detail in the document. Get that out, let's consult on it, and let's bring everything together when we have the board together in October.
Many of the board have asked the same questions that you're asking here. So how do you maintain the integrity of the competing teams if they're in the same campus? That'll be something we're really interested to hear about during the consultation.
Given the emotions of the situation, is there a fear of player strike action at this stage?
Of course, we've spoken about that. We want to closely engage with the players. We started last evening. We're going to run as many meetings as possible with the players so that they understand the perspective and the opportunity. What I would hope, and early indications are positive that people really want to listen and be engaged in what a great Welsh system going forwards could look like. So we want to work really closely and communicate with them because, of course, a strike would be a disaster for everybody. I think I've experienced that with England rugby many years ago. It was not a good time, and I don't think it would take our agenda forward. But I think that the guys last night were asked really intelligent questions, really engaged in the process, and I think they understand the big picture. So I hope that's really going to take us to a good place.
hard for them to operate in this as well. I mean, they've got months to the start of the season. They'll be starting when the consultation's underway as well, so it's tough for them.
I understand it is tough. You know, it's not the ideal timing, but you know, I think we can't wait any longer. We need to move forward to what the future can look like.
We have done everything we can to give current players security. So, you know, it goes back to the Cardiff question. You know, kind of what we didn't want is, you know, that players being worried about whether they had a job, etc. So we have, you know, underwritten all the contracts going forward. So that's, you know, I think it's given. I'm not saying it's the whole answer, but we are doing everything we can to give them security. Because we want to keep. This is all about keeping the best talent in Wales and then giving them the best environment in which to thrive. So if we were to lose players, that's the wrong answer.
So from the back.
You've talked a lot about investment fatigue. Have you had any indication that investors would want to be involved? Just given that I imagine they would want some level of control, whereas as I see it, you will have complete control of the playing side.
So we're in dialogue with existing team owners about this proposal, and we expect them to input to it. As I said before, you know, we obviously want more control on the rugby side, so we're in dialogue with them. There's going to be a continuum on that matter. We also, as many of you know, we asked for expressions of interest in Cardiff, and we had several. So there's also some other potential investors out there as well, which we are cognizant of. So, and we want at the end of the day, we want an investable proposition. We don't want to have to face the situation again where the clubs in Wales are struggling financially. And one of the graphs, I may just point this out, one of the graphs, I think it's still in the pack, is looking at our performance against the money we put in, against the timeline. And it's quite clear that from 2019 onwards, our performance has fallen off a cliff in terms of the men's elite game. And, you know, that is the time when money was cut dramatically into Welsh Rugby, and we're still struggling, or were struggling, to recover from that. We will be releasing our financial results in a couple of weeks' time, I hope, and you'll see there that we've turned the finances around in the WRU. We're now doing a lot better financially than we were, and massively better compared to where we were 2 years ago. And so we have some money to invest, and this is a good time for us to go out and consult how we want to invest that money collectively on behalf of Welsh Rugby.
Will the model be closer to New Zealand than any other country when it comes to you're in control of the rugby, the investors are in control of the commercial side?
So, I mean, that the model that is in here at the moment is probably akin to the New Zealand licence model, where New Zealand Rugby keeps a lot of the rugby control, but licence holders get to drive everything else. But and we've talked about this a lot with the current owners, we're really interested in hearing, we're not black and white on exactly where we draw the line on that. And I think that you know, what we have in Wales is benefactors as well as investors. You know, they haven't made any money on this, and they've invested for a long time, and they've invested because they care about the rugby piece. So actually we need to understand to them, what are the elements in that rugby piece that really matter to them? What are those emotional connections that they want to maintain? And we really do want to engage with them in that and find where is that right balance that gives us that rugby alignment, whilst also giving them what they gets them up in the morning to invest.
Have you spoken to David Moffat about the sub-involvement of the Scarlets for any advice on how to restructure the game in Wales?
No, we've not spoken to David Moffat.